Live? Hello, live from the barn with Natasha. Today we are answering the question of why do we ride? And there's actually a lot of scientific reasons about why we ride, but sometimes it's hard. And I think we consider that at times as like, why do we spend so much time and so much money on these horses? Because there's so many ups and downs. There's good times, there's bad times. One second you feel like you're on top of the world, and then the next second you're like crushed, or something's happened, or your horse is lame, and it can be so heartbreaking as well. So in honor of bringing in the new year, in honor of my boot camp, my 5-day online boot camp, which is starting tomorrow, I'm going to be talking about why we ride. And let me know in the chat if you're watching here live, if you can hear us, and also why do you ride. So the theme of this video is do hard things. And riding definitely falls into that category of hard things. If you think about it, we have to do a lot of hard things in our life. Like we have to go to work and we have to pay our taxes and we have to have hard conversations. But riding falls into that category of a hard thing that we do by choice, right? No one forces us to have horses. No one forces us to ride. It's something that we do by choice. And so why do we do that? Because it certainly would be a lot easier to sit in your house and scroll TikTok or watch YouTube all the time, but that's not really good for your brain and that's not really fulfilling at all. So I listened to this really great podcast a couple of days ago where it covered like all of the different hormones and chemicals in your brain. And I thought it was really helpful to understand why we ride and why we do things that are difficult and why we do things that are hard. So let me know if you're interested in hearing about these brain chemicals. I'm going to be sharing those next. So, and again, I'm not an expert in this field, so I had to make some little cards here to talk about them. Okay, first important brain hormone is dopamine. And so dopamine is something that's like when you scroll TikTok, you're releasing little bits of dopamine. Like it makes you feel good, right? To like scroll TikTok or do something like that. But doing hard things actually stores dopamine in your brain. So, doing things like riding, something that requires a lot of discipline, something that requires effort, setting your goals, which is what we're going to be doing tomorrow in boot camp, like having high and hard goals, working towards something that's hard, that stores dopamine in your brain and that creates willpower and it makes you feel better in the long term. Like I don't know if you've ever noticed, but if you sit there and you like scroll social media, the next day you don't feel so great. But riding and doing hard things, it makes you feel good. It gives you a sense of accomplishment. And it also, when you're riding, you can't think about anything else. You have to be in a flow state where you're present with your horse. Okay, so that's the first one is dopamine. Now, the second one is serotonin. Serotonin is another feel good chemical in our brains. And the best ways to get more serotonin is number one, to go out in the sunlight. And that is one thing that I think for all of us, riding gets us out, right? It gets us out in nature, it gets us out in the sunlight. And ultimately, that makes you feel better. If you sit in your house, if you sit in the dark all day, you're not feeling very good. The other thing, don't make fun of my bad drawings, but that's supposed to be an apple there. And the other thing about serotonin is eating well. So eating processed foods diminishes your serotonin, but eating really good whole foods, like eating fruits, eating vegetable, eating unprocessed whole foods will also increase your serotonin levels. So you need to be out in the sunlight. You need to be eating good food, just like our horses eat, right? Like carrots and apples, that's going to be good for you. And then the next hormone is oxytocin. And this is another hormone that, again, like as I was listening to this podcast, I was thinking, oh my gosh, like no wonder we love riding. No wonder we love horses because it it helps our brains to feel better, basically. That's the long and short of it. So, oxytocin, how can we boost oxytocin levels? The one of the best ways to do it is gratitude practices. So, gratitude is about, waking up each day and thinking like, gosh, I'm so lucky. I have a horse. I get to ride. I'm feeling good. I made a little bit of progress. And studies show too that when you celebrate your little achievements on the along the way, so when you are allow yourself to be like, "Oh, I had a really great canter transition today," that ultimately you make more progress over time. So gratitude and celebrating those little achievements is also going to help to boost your oxytocin. And then the last brain chemical that they talked about was endorphins. And so a lot of times we get stressed, right? We get stressed about our lives or things happening in our lives. The best way to reduce stress is to exert yourself physically. If we think back to like prehistoric times when we had to like run away from a bear or catch our food, that required a big amount of physical exertion. And by exerting yourself physically, you actually reduce stress. And so that's another reason that you should ride, right? Riding is something physical. It gets you out there. It requires you to exert yourself physically. And I don't know if you've noticed, but after a ride, you always feel better. So, this is why we ride. This is why we do hard things. I want you to think a little bit about that for yourself. Like, why do you ride? What is it about riding? Hopefully this has given you some insight, it to why we go through so much like pain and suffering for these little moments that like feel really good and that we really enjoy. I do hope that you come to our 5-day riding boot camp. It's starting tomorrow, January 1st. And I'm going to be doing a live training each morning, just helping you with goal setting, helping you to plan your year ahead. It's going to be epic. So I do hope that you come, and hopefully that this has inspired you to continue doing hard things like riding your horses. Okay, the end. We'll see you tomorrow. Good girl, Natasha.